is typically measured by a combination of factors, Comrade Speaker, including crime rate, response time, community engagements, officer training, completion rate, complaint statistics, etc. We didn't hear much about any of those factors. To be honest, Minister Ben, honorable member, seem to believe that police cars and buildings solve crime. Mr. Speaker, I wouldn't waste more time on such a poor presentation from the honorable minister. I want to say thank you for giving me the floor, Mr. Speaker, and to let me thank all the staff from the Ministry of Finance, staff of all the other ministries, including those at the regional and municipal level, for the hard work done to prepare Budget 2025. Mr. Speaker, I'm not thanking you. Mr. Speaker, notwithstanding their efforts, the final document as presented by the Minister with responsibility for finance is based on the policy direction of the People's Progressive Party or lack of thereof. As such, I will focus my attention on concerns with respect to the policies and programs that exist and those that are absent, and also offer alternatives as we are expected to do as the government in waiting. Mr. Speaker, Guyanese as a whole, whether they support PNCR, PPP, AFC, whichever political party, for decades, as far back as 1966, when we gained independence, have always known that our country possessed tremendous potential to transform from its poor status to a position that will ensure that every Guyanese can live a comfortable life. They also knew then, as we know now, and have come to realize that in order for us to reach our full potential and to realize the dream of a united Guyana, in which all of our citizens can benefit from fair and equitable distribution of our national patrimony, our approach to governance has to be one in which all stakeholders are allowed to participate. Mr. Speaker, I say this because since the discovery of oil in 2015, significant investments by the oil companies has transformed our country from its poor state into one of the fastest growing economies in the world. Our GDP has surpassed all our CARICOM and South American neighbors. Notwithstanding this, Mr. Speaker, over the past 5 years, we've heard the tens of thousands of voices of ordinary Guyanese who continue to struggle with the reality of this economy in which their income does not allow them to take care of their most basic needs. Needs like providing 3 square meals a day for their family and paying their rent and utility bills. So, Mr. Speaker, while the likes of Honorable Member Ashley Singh, Wana Jill, and others on the government side will harp gloriously about all the infrastructure, etc., being done, if we do not change our approach towards governance and allow all stakeholders, including the opposition and the other civil society groups and NGOs, to contribute to the process in a significant way, a majority of Guyanese will continue to suffer the way they are. Mr. Speaker, the 2025 budget, because of the oil industry, is larger than all of the APNU AFC's budgets combined from 2015 to 2019. In fact, if we were to total up the yearly budgets prior to oil discovery, you will find, Mr. Speaker, that the last 2 PPP budgets will be equivalent to more than 15 to 20 years of Guyana's total expenditure. As such, Budget 2025 presented another opportunity for the government to demonstrate its willingness to adopt a collaborative approach, ensuring that opposition suggestions, at minimum, are sought and included where necessary in the budget. The PPP's failure to engage the opposition proves their so-called One Guyana mantra to be nothing more than an empty campaign slogan, orchestrated to deceive Guyanese while they conceal their quest for total domination and control of the country through one-party rule. Mr. Speaker, during the 2024 budget debates, I had the painstaking task of highlighting the significant contribution of the I'll touch on natural resources, Comrade Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to turn to your attention to the Natural Resource Ministry and gold mining in particular, which I mentioned last year, does not escape the PPP's friends, family, and favorites policy, nor the accompanying mismanagement and discrimination. Mr. Speaker, during the 2024 budget, I had the painstaking task of highlighting the significant contributions of the industry to the economy. Mr. Speaker, I explained that the gold industry remained a key contributor to national economic performance and to hinterland settlement and development. In fact, Mr. Speaker, gold accounts for about 6 to 8% of the non-oil GDP and 60 to 70% of non-oil exports. So it is a crucial industry which we ought to pay key attention to and to ensure that it is properly managed. Mr. Speaker, despite record high prices in recent years, the industry continues to have a dismal performance, and the PPP government seems quite content with treating the industry like a stepchild, while parroting the same excuses for the constant decline of the industry year after year. Mr. Speaker, if you read the section of the budget on gold, for the last 5 years, you will see that it not only confirms what I just said, but you will also recognize that for every single year, rather than make realistic projections, they attempt to fool the people into believing that the next year gold will prosper. Mr. Speaker, the PPP has now presented 6 budgets, 5 of which they projected major increases in gold production, none of which were achieved. Mr. Speaker, the production level by the APNU AFC in 2019 was over 641,000 ounces. For 5 straight years under this PPP government, who, by the way, continues to have access to hundreds of billions of dollars from oil resources, hundreds of billions from revenue collection, and hundreds of billions of dollars from access to loans and grants, gold has constantly plummeted by more than 30%, down to 434,067 ounces. Interestingly, Mr. Speaker, the reason for the decline, as stated in the 2020 to 2024 budget, is due to low declaration from small and medium-scale miners. Mr. Speaker, while the government seeks to indicate an increase in production by an insignificant 0.5% or 1,954 ounces, it is a lone large-scale company that accounts for it. Production among small and medium-scale miners, Comrade Speaker, actually fell by more than 33,000 ounces. Mr. Speaker, because of the PPP incompetence and mismanagement of the gold industry over the 5-year period, the people of Guyana lost about $300 billion. Mr. Speaker, they didn't need to increase production from the 2019 level left by the APNU AFC. If they had just maintained it, we would have gained over 700,000 more ounces of gold. Mr. Speaker, the revenue loss is equivalent to the entire 2019 budget. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, the gold industry cannot only be seen as a revenue base for the country, but it also aids in occupying and securing much of our territory, for which Venezuela has constantly attempted to claim. It provides much needed employment for the indigenous communities and generally props up the local economies in many rural communities. Mr. Speaker, the fact that gold prices have been consistently high over the last 5 years, but yet has not attracted significant investment, tells a story of neglect and poor management. And I know the Minister of Natural Resource will, in his rebuttal, state that a second company, I believe OKO West, is coming with a projected annual projection of 353,000 ounces. Mr. Speaker, even if you were to add their production to the current production levels, it will struggle to match what existed under APNU AFC 6 years ago. Mr. Speaker, the focus has to be on small and medium-scale mining. I suspect that the PPP's friends, family, and favorites policy is what might be affecting the small and medium-scale mining. In fact, over the last year, I've received several complaints about the Guyana Geology and Mines favoring friends of the government over the small miners. I had a particular case to deal with here today, Comrade Speaker, but I will not deal with it because I was advised by the small miner not to, and I respect his wishes. As the next government, Comrade Speaker, we will conduct the necessary mineral mapping, as I stated last year, the necessary mineral mapping in a timely manner to open up new lands for gold mining and other critical minerals. Those minerals that are important to industry and new technology, but are of limited availability due to geology, economics, geopolitics, or environmental barriers, and are hard to substitute, thereby encouraging large investments in the industry, but at the same time ensuring a level playing field for small and medium-scale miners. We will also promote Guyana as a mineral investment destination, Comrade Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Minister responsible for finance, let me just touch on bauxite quickly. The Minister responsible for finance reported that in 2024, there was a 225% increase in production to 1,700,000 tons. This sounds like good news, Comrade Speaker, for the industry, since, as we are aware, the bauxite industry has for decades presented many challenges, some seeming insurmountable. But, Mr. Speaker, if you look closer at the statistics, the increase is simply due to one of the existing companies expanding their operation with a new kiln. In fact, Mr. Speaker, the AP and UAFC, through our 5 years in office, from 2015 to 2019, saw an average yearly export of over 1,660,000 tons, with a peak production, Mr. Speaker, of 1,924,466 tons in 20 and 1,920,336 tons in 2018 and 2019, respectively. Mr. Speaker, this exceeds the 5-year average production under the PPP from 2020 to 2024. Their average is 828,000 tons over a 5-year period, a significant decline by more than 50%. Mr. Speaker, I am certain that both the Finance Minister and Minister of Natural Resource will seek to defend their dismal performance by blaming the AP and UAFC for the bauxite company Rusal's departure. But the reality is, Mr. Speaker, companies have their own internal challenges, as did Rusal for many years prior to the APNU FC government. Mr. Speaker, I will remind the government that when APNU FC came to power in 2015, we were faced with similar situations. For example, the Venezuela-Guyana paddy for fuel deal had collapsed. Certain markets for rice which the PPP enjoyed were gone. Farmers took to the streets in protest because of the low paddy price. We didn't complain and blame the PPP for 5 years, Comrade Speaker, but we rose to the occasion as any competent government would, found new markets and rescued the rice industry. So much so, hold on, it gets better, so much so, Comrade Speaker, that the two highest production levels ever recorded in the history of this country, according to 2016 and 2019, under the APNU FC. Mr. Speaker, they can't come crying and blaming the APNU FC. They must man up, I say. Be truthful and admit your incompetence. Mr. Speaker, Guyana's bauxite deposits can produce probably the world's widest range of bauxite products, such as metallurgic grade, refractory grade, cement grade, chemical grade bauxite. The PPP in the last 5 years, with resources available, has failed to better leverage this global comparative advantage. As the next government, Comrade Speaker, we will work to advance the industry, utilizing the various qualities of our deposit and to convert the raw bauxite into value-added products. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to touch on oil and gas, natural resource, and low-carbon development strategy. The minister claimed in his budget speech that he intends to strike an, I quote, appropriate balance between short-term imperatives and long-term considerations. How are they doing this while spending 95% of the NRF funds, Comrade Speaker? This approach suggests that all matters are short-term imperatives, At the current rate of depletion, it will be years, Comrade Speaker, before significant funds will be available to invest so that we have funds to stabilize the economy and to ensure prosperity for future generations. By its own admission, Comrade Speaker, global oil supply will surpass demand in 2025, leading to a 10.95 drop in oil price to just around $71 per barrel. This drop has consequences for the GDP growth rate. 2025 growth is expected to slow to 10.6%, down from 43.6% in 2024. This significant drop is a prima facie evidence that Guyana is already oil dependent, Comrade Speaker. This increases the risk inherent in spending essentially all of our oil revenues. Point number 2, Comrade Speaker. The second point I want to highlight is that the PPP government is both lawless and disrespectful to the Guyanese people. On page 24 of the budget speech, Comrade Speaker, the minister accounted for every dollar spent from the monies received from Norway through the low carbon development strategy, but refuses in the same breath to account for the spending of hundreds of millions of dollars of our oil money. Mr. Speaker, the minister gave specific details on the LCDS spending. They accounted to the Norwegians, Comrade Speaker, for their LCDS money. But when it comes to our oil money, the PPP continues to violate their own law, which they brought to this very house, Comrade Speaker, and approved by themselves in December of 2021. Mr. Speaker, clause 16.2 says, and I'll read it, all withdrawal from the fund shall be deposited into the consolidated funds and shall be used only to finance 1, national development priorities, and 2, essential projects that are directly related to ameliorating the effects of a major natural disaster. Mr. Speaker, there is a clause in this act which directs the Minister of Finance, that a Minister of Finance could face up to 10 years imprisonment if he fails to disclose the monies received from oil. Mr. Speaker, I suggest to this House today that we extend this penalty to any finance minister who fails to disclose how our oil money is spent and prohibit the National Assembly from further approving any oil money until that which was spent is properly accounted for. The lawlessness and disrespect shown by the People's Progressive Party to the people of Guyana must end now, Comrade Speaker. Point number 3, arbitration and audits. Mr. Speaker, we often speak about growing our natural resource revenues and production, but too little time is spent on the question of safeguarding those revenues and the future of the industry. Of these industries. The PPP has proven not to be the guardians of our patrimony, but a sleeping watchman, Comrade Speaker. So deep is their sleep, Mr. Speaker, that Guyanese have heard virtually nothing about the various arbitration cases plaguing the nation. What are we doing to ensure the Guyanese people receive their fair due and to prevent sizable losses, Comrade Speaker? The PPP's hands are so slippery from oil money. Their eyes are so blinded by black gold that they care little if hundreds of millions of US dollars slide through the government's fingers. Mr. Speaker, Guyana's forced oil audit erupted into controversy after the PPP claimed that a government functionary nearly signed away $214 million US in recoverable monies that the audit flagged as questionable costs. We have heard very little about these monies, even though we argued in last year's budget that funds should be set aside to fight this case. Mr. Speaker, can the government tell us where these monies are? These monies could easily finance the $20 billion in direct cost of living mitigation we have advocated for, more than doubling the government's paltry 2025 $9 billion sum. Mr. Speaker, irresponsible governance has real consequences, and the runaway cost of living crisis is one of them. The government must urgently update the nation and recover these monies. Mr. Speaker, it is these very loopholes and wastages that the APNU proposed to plug as part of the next government and utilize these very funds to bring much needed cost of living relief to the poor and working class people of this country. On the other hand, Comrade Speaker, our natural gas is being similarly mismanaged. The gas-to-energy plant teeters on the brink of disaster, with multiple delays piling up, and the government going as far as removing VAT on generators, a warning sign, Comrade Speaker, if we ever saw one, that the project may be far from completion. If this were not concerning enough, there are not one but two arbitration claims by the contractor against the government. The first is $50 million, and the second is likely to be just as hefty a sum. Who knows what the final total will be after all these lawsuits, and whether there are even more on the way, Comrade Speaker. Here again, the government has been silent, only acknowledging the first suit after an international newspaper broke the story. Further, Comrade Speaker, the government selected a forum to explore opportunities to monetize our natural gas and build out infrastructure. But international media coverage has raised serious questions about the contractor's capabilities. Mr. Speaker, Comrade Speaker, what steward of our resources would name a company with no history of successful projects to oversee $100 billion worth of natural gas reserves, as some experts have estimated? Comrade Speaker, what responsible steward would overlook the long list of qualified companies that applied to fill this role? Mr. Speaker, only the PPP, which is fond of giving infant companies adult responsibilities. Mr. Speaker, now the government seems to be scrambling to address this gap in governance, still uncertain how Guyana can benefit fully from its natural gas wealth. Mr. Speaker, I want to reassure the Guyanese people that not only are we very much aware of the opportunities to benefit from the natural gas production, but as the next government, the APNU intends to deploy resources for the required feasibility studies. After all, unlike the PPP, we are not prepared to play games with US $100 billion. Mr. Speaker, we will focus on providing low cooking gas and free fertilizer, as well as work towards clay brick manufacturing, metal smelting and fabrication, transportation, fuel development, gas production, and ceramic manufacturing, among other industries. Natural gas can power all of these opportunities, and we look forward to generating high-paying jobs, tax revenue, and economic growth across several sectors. There are boundless opportunities available, Comrade Speaker, for a sensible government to evaluate and pursue. Sadly, Comrade Speaker, after 5 years, the PPP has not demonstrated that they have the intellectual capacity or the focus to make prudent use of $100 billion in natural gas. Mr. Speaker, the APNU has outlined a comprehensive set of policies, strategies, and principles that will guide our management of the oil and gas sector as the next government. Here are some of the things we will do as the next government. One, within 90 days of taking office, our administration will constitute a distinguished advisory team of professionals to advise the government on the upstream, midstream, and downstream planning, development, and administration of Guyana's oil and gas sector. Two, we will review the existing drafts of the Petroleum Commission legislation and restructure as necessary to finalize the establishment of an independent, autonomous petroleum commission equipped with the highest caliber of fit-for-purpose professionals to manage the oil and gas sector from application for license through auction, exploration, production, sales, refining, and gas utilization for energy. Mr. Speaker, the PPP has betrayed the trust of the Guyanese people on this very matter. In opposition, and even in the first few months after 2020, both Minister of Natural Resources Vikram Bharat and the Vice President is not here today to hear this. But after he's never here, but after becoming
you want to withdraw that because I keep a register here of the attendance of
thank you, Comrade Speaker. He's not here today, and sometimes he's absent very often. But he's here at times, very often absent. No respect. promised to set up the Petroleum Commission. They promised to set up the Petroleum Commission, Comrade Speaker, but after becoming comfortable and with their hands on the oil money, they turned their backs on the Guyanese people. Mr. Speaker, point number 3, to eradicate corruption, well, I can't say corruption, but to eradicate the run-ins we can say, and unethical conduct by any government or any contractor official. We will institute an independent Inspector General office with a 24/7 anonymous hotline to involve the public in reporting any knowledge or appearance of the run-ins. Point number 4, we will immediately reinstate the coalition government's requirements for full liability coverage. This includes the appropriate insurance as well as a parent company guarantee to cover the full cost of an oil spill. Point number 5, Comrade Speaker. This is the last point I will make. We have about 20 points on the oil and gas, but this is the last one I will make here today. We will undertake a complete review of the Stabroek Block PSA. Again, Comrade Speaker, the PPP betrayed the people, campaigned on renegotiating the oil contract, but when they took office, they deserted the Guyanese people. Transformational infrastructure. I want to speak on that a little, Comrade Speaker. Energy expansion and diversification. Mr. Speaker, in paragraphs 4.82 and 4.83 of the budget speech, as presented by the Minister of Finance, the Minister, and by extension the PPP government, admitted to the challenges faced by our energy sector, stating clearly that they are long-standing and well-known. They went on to blame the opposition for dismantling the Amelia Falls Hydro project. But, Mr. Speaker, the problems surrounding our energy crisis does not lie only in power generation or lack of capacity to satisfy the demand, but major issues also exist in the transmission and delivery of power and the overall management of the sector, neither of which would have been addressed through the Amelia Falls Hydro project. Mr. Speaker, the APNU AFC on various occasions sought to educate and warn the PPP about these issues. We warned them about the power ships, the same way we warned them about the Amelia Falls project. But after $16 billion of investment, thousands of households and run-ins, thousands of households and businesses continue to suffer from significant levels of blackout. Mr. Speaker, to mask their incompetence and mismanagement of the sector, they resort to blaming the APNU AFC for 5 straight years. But the reality is, Mr. Speaker, the APNU AFC kept people's lights on, Comrade Speaker. We kept them on. And we reduced blackouts significantly. When PPP came to power, Comrade Speaker, once again in 2020, the dark days and nights returned with them. Mr. Speaker, the stark reality of the 2025 budget is that it does not guarantee energy security for all of Guyana, but rather places a majority of its focus on a single project, the gas to energy project, as the sole solution to our energy crisis, and the removal of VAT on backup electricity generators. Mr. Speaker, clearly the minister has no faith in the ability of his own government to fix the power crisis. Mr. Speaker, as the next government in waiting, I would like the Guyanese people to know that we understand the discomfort and disruption to their lives and the losses they suffer due to blackouts. In the APNU AFC, we have thoroughly analyzed the situation and understand fully that supply of energy to households and businesses is short on accessibility, affordability, availability, and dependability, which are key performance requirements. So here is how we will fix the sector as the next government, Mr. Speaker. We will implement an energy security strategy to ensure that all households and businesses receive reliable and affordable power, and our power supply and infrastructure are not vulnerable to natural and other threats. In particular, Mr. Speaker, we will focus on 6 key areas. 1, more effective management of the development of our natural gas resources. 2, we will upgrade the heavy fuel generation system to back up and energy emergency purposes. 3, invest massively in solar, hydropower, and other renewable energy sources, with specific emphasis on remote communities in regions 1, 7, 8, 9, and 10. This is to ensure both short-term and long-term energy security as our gas supply dwindles. 4, we will maintain high levels of redundancy and diversity in the in energy source and generation capacity.
5, you need an extension of 5 minutes.
Comrade Speaker, I move that the honourable member be given 5 minutes to continue his presentation.
Honourable member, you have 5 minutes to continue and conclude.
Thank you, Comrade Speaker. 5, we will more rapidly overhaul the entire transmission and distribution system. And 6, explore the possibility of making our electricity system modular to reduce the geographic scale of blackouts. Mr. Speaker, with proper management of the sector and the implementation of these and other measures, we guarantee real transformational change in the energy sector, and that will redound to major improvements in the lives and livelihoods of all Guyanese. The transportation sector, Comrade Speaker, transportation infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, while the PPP with oil money in hand boasts about new infrastructural development to come on stream shortly, many questions remain unanswered. For example, Mr. Speaker, a second bridge over the Borbis River. What informed the government's decision on this? How can VP Jack Dio tell this nation that a feasibility study is not necessary? What informed the government's decision to repair the Linden-Suicide Highway rather than expand it into a major 4-lane highway, since it is a section of the main artery connecting Brazil to Georgetown? Mr. Speaker, I will leave for the critique of this poorly developed PPP infrastructure plan to my other colleagues. Let me share with you and all of Guyana what to expect from an APNU-led government after the next election. Infrastructure development will be geared towards improving productivity, livability, and sustainability. Mr. Speaker, to achieve these objectives, our transformational infrastructure plan focuses on 2 distinct areas. 1, an inter-town connection road network or intercity highways. This aspect will see the construction of paved roads linking Linden and New Amsterdam, Linden and Lethem, Linden and Madia, and Madia and Bartikel as notable examples. Mr. Speaker, there is presently no road link between New Amsterdam and Linden, although these 2 major towns are roughly 55 miles apart and serve vast catchment areas. We will build a New Amsterdam-Linden highway. Number 2, a coastal hinterland road network. With regards to the coastal hinterland network, we will focus on replanning, upgrading, or creating routes that connect, for example, Bartica to Upper Mazroni and Esquibo Coast to Middle Cayuni and the Northwest District. These projects will improve bridging the Esquibo River, bridging the Esquibo River at several points. Work will be undertaken only after detailed feasibility studies, impact assessments, and public consultations. Unlike our political rivals in the PPP, as the next government, we will spend the people's money responsibly and sensibly. Mr. Speaker, because of time, I will jump to the people-centered approach to governance. Mr. Speaker, as the next government, we will put people first and at the center of our development agenda. We will put oil money in there as we did before, correct. We will put money in the hands of the people, of the Guyanese people, and guarantee a high quality of life. We will make Guyana one of the best countries to live in. Mr. Speaker, in our first budget, an APNU-led government will do the following. Introduce a 35% increase for all public servants, including our teachers, doctors, nurses, discipline forces, and all other government workers. Compare this with the paltry 8% the PPP will be given next year. 2, we will increase the tax-free threshold. Is it 8 or 9? Anyway, it's paltry. This year and next year, they got something too. Next year, but you're out, so we won't consider that. We will increase the tax-free threshold to $400,000. It therefore means that the majority of public servants who work for $400,000 less will pay no taxes. Compare that with the PPP paltry $130,000 tax-free threshold. 3, households will benefit from $100,000 every month in cash subsidies and other benefits. This adds up to over $1 million in cash and other benefits yearly. No payment on household electricity bills, $10,000 or less. No payment on household water bills, $5,000 or less. Cost of cooking gas will be reduced by more than 50%. Rent and mortgage assistance will also be introduced. Point 4, Comrade Speaker, we will give a good governance cash grant of at least $100,000, maybe once or twice a year, to every adult. Point number 5, we will give a child care allowance of $10,000 for every child from birth up to 16 years old, and an additional nutritional voucher of $2,500 for every child up to 5 years old. Point number 6, we will not only offer free university education, but also introduce a 50,000 stipend for those poor and low income students. For the current students, we will reimburse your loan and cash payments immediately. For graduates, we will write off the payments and reimbursements as long as you satisfy certain criteria, for example, like working in the country for 5 years. Point number 7, we will introduce an old age pension, Comrade Speaker, of no less than $80,000. Point number 8, let us be very clear, Comrade Speaker, the APNU government will not stop part-time job scheme, but instead we will train all such workers so that they can get full-time employment benefit at higher full-time rate. We will pay a training stipend of $50,000 per month, which is $10,000 more than what the PPP is currently giving them. Mr. Speaker, too many people and households are poor in Guyana. In addition, many households are economically insecure. The high prices for food, rent, electricity, travel, etc. continue to burden Guyanese families as prices continue to rise due to high inflation rate and PPP mismanagement of our economy.
Honorable member, I gave you an extra minute because I wanted to hear what you were going to give a pensioner like me. Unfortunately, I'll have to now cut you off at this time. Thank you very much. And now for the honorable member.